the deal that caused the most drama on deadline day was arguably Marc Guehi's fallen through transfer that looked done. Palace even produced a goodbye video to their captain, but it collapsed because Oliver Glasner put his foot down and said he isn't going anywhere because they can't get a replacement. Was it as simple as that, Crook? Because the inside track that we're all hearing is quite fascinating.
It is fascinating, and I've heard numerous different versions of events, actually, including that maybe Marc Guehi himself was having second thoughts on deadline day about whether this was the right move. I think the most accurate version, the one we reported as the drama unfolded on deadline day, and you always get one of these stories that keeps you entertained and enthralled right up until the window closes. It was, as you said, that Oliver Glasner made it clear to Steve Parish, as he did in his interview 24 hours before, that under no circumstances could Palace afford to sell their captain. And I think there was a danger that if Steve Parish overruled his manager, particularly bearing in mind there's a decent job in Germany that Erik ten Hag has just vacated at Bayer Leverkusen, that Oliver Glasner may threaten to walk away from Palace. So ultimately, I think Parish has made the decision, we need to keep our manager, and the best way to do that is by keeping our captain. So a win-win situation for Crystal Palace fans, but obviously not ideal for Marc Guehi, because who knows what can happen between now and the end of the season in terms of Liverpool's interest.
Yeah, I mean, he will still get a big move, won't he? Because there's no doubt that someone, some big, whether it be European giant or Premier League giant, will definitely come into him, especially if he's on a free transfer. And actually from January, he can start negotiating with clubs on the continent, Scott. So he'll have no shortage of suitors.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm not necessarily comparing myself to him, but I went on a free to Benfica. I didn't see that coming until after the FA Cup final, so when the season had finished. So anything can happen. But I do feel for Marc Guehi. I mean, look, he's the one guy in this. And you look at Johan Vista, what he did, Alexander Isak, what he did, and they got their moves, and Marc Guehi didn't. I'm not having at all. I'm not surprised it's come out, but I'm not having at all that he didn't want to go and didn't want to make the move. You know, this is Liverpool, and look what they're doing at the moment. They're already Premier League champions. They're absolutely tearing it up in the transfer market. And if he had have gone, that would have been the perfect transfer market for Liverpool. He could get a serious injury. And I know people just throw that out willy-nilly, but that actually really can happen. I was quite happy to let my contract run out because I did that on a couple of occasions because I was happy with whatever happened. What will be. But clearly, remember that straight after Stamford Bridge, where they got that draw, and Oliver Glasner kind of called him over, and he went no. So this has been going on for weeks. This is not just a last day thing, and suddenly we've got a phone call. Liverpool could be coming in. He's made it known that he wants to leave a couple of weeks ago. Now, will Liverpool come in for him? They might do. They might not. I don't really get the. Not from Palace's point of view, from a football point of view, he can go in January for 25 million. Just by him staying to the end of the season, Palace could finish easily 4 or 5 places higher up in the table. It's £3 million a place. They can create history again by winning the Europa Conference League. And you know what I think? Any Premier League side in that competition should be favourites to win it. This is a wonderful opportunity for Palace to be absolutely the best time in their history. So, but the bottom line is collateral damage is Marc Guehi. I don't blame Oliver Glasner at all. He's got to do what's right for him and his football club. But at the same time, I think it's going to take a long time for that relationship to be repaired. And they are totally relying on Marc Guehi being a good person and a good professional. And there's a lot of players out there who would not be like that.
Yeah, he is, though, and he's one of these great sort of characteristics is the fact that he is a solid citizen and he will get on with it, even if he is a little bit disappointed, which is one of the reports that's doing the rounds. You mentioned this is something that's been going on for a few weeks, and it was obvious that Liverpool wanted him. So why then, Crook, did it take Liverpool so long to make a formal bid for him until the final weekend of the transfer window? That's got to be the biggest question, hasn't it? Because, you know, I mentioned to you in one of our transfer pods at the beginning of the weekend that actually there was a little bit of pushback about Liverpool's behaviour from inside Crystal Palace. It was well known they would come in for him right at the end. Liverpool would refute any suggestion of wrongdoing. But, like Scott said, everybody knew that they were going to bid. Why did they wait until the last minute?
Well, this is what happens in transfer windows. It's a game of poker, a game of brinkmanship, if you like. We saw it to a certain extent with Chelsea and Alejandro Garnacho. We reported quite early in the summer that Chelsea had told Garnacho they were coming, just to wait, sit patiently, bide his time. All the time, their view was that Manchester United's asking price would have to come down, because the nearer you get to the end of the window, the more desperate the selling club becomes. It happened with Anthony at Manchester United as well. Real Betis would have loved to have signed him the day after the Conference League final. But again, they waited until the last couple of days of the window to get the best possible deal. And it was the same for Liverpool and Marc Guehi. Their need wasn't urgent because Van Dijk and Konate have started the season fully fit. So it wasn't like they were short in terms of their starting 11 for a central defender. And Palace's asking price was quite high earlier in the summer, well in excess of £40 million. Obviously, that came down to 35 plus a sell-on, which was the fee that was agreed eventually on deadline day. So I don't really think Liverpool have done a lot wrong here. I think personally the mistake that Palace made was not cashing in on Guéhi last summer. You can say, okay, he's gone on to help them win the FA Cup. Who's to say if that would have happened if he wasn't there? But they would have got £60 million for him last summer. It would have been 35 this summer. They're probably now going to have to sell him in January for what, £20 million, or let him go on a free.
Sam, I don't want to bash Liverpool because they're a fantastic football club and they've had a great window. And what Arne Slot did, classy guy, with everything that they've dealt with things both on and off the pitch, and you know what I mean by that. But £35 million could have been done, even £40 million. The only reason that it's that low is because he's got a year left in his contract. So take advantage of that. To get Marc Guehi for 45 million is unbelievable. So get the deal done. And actually, it could be argued, forget about the math, that his signing was more important than Alexander Isak, the way that Ekitike is playing and the way that they're scoring goals. I appreciate in terms of numbers have gone, you want to replace that. But, I mean, what would we all have thought if they'd have got Marc Guehi? It's almost done and dusted with the Premier League title.
Well, maybe it's a good thing that they didn't for that reason, because otherwise we'd be sitting here today saying,
absolutely,
right, should we just get the trophy out and engrave their name on it? So maybe we've got a bit more of a contest as a result of that. But they might still get Guehi. And actually, you know, you say they could get him for 30, 40 million, whatever. They might be thinking, well, actually, we've probably got enough to get us through to the end of this season. So we can get him on a free next summer. So why wouldn't we do that?
Well, they were clearly willing to pay the 35 million to get him now. And yes, Konate had a very good game against Arsenal, but he hadn't had a good game in the Community Shield in the first two opening games, and there's no guarantee that he will be like the Arsenal game for the rest of the season. That was a really important signing where I'll go back to for 35, 40 million. It almost could have been done and dusted, the Premier League title.